So Insulate Britain protesters seem to have, it would appear, partly secured what they wanted from the government today, with future homeowners only getting mortgages if they approve their new property's energy efficiency. But even as Insulate Britain seemingly got their way, footage emerged of the extent to which the campaign group has antagonised the public with their uncompromising tactics. A video filmed last week, actually, in Thurrock in Essex, shows one driver desperate to get her children to school, trying to nudge protesters out of the way. Let's have a watch.
Push them! Push them! That's it! Push them up the road!
He's going to rip you.
Push them up the road!
Wait, I'm not joking, my son needs to get to school.
Push them up the road!
Move out the way now!
She's going to
I
punch
can't
her up,
bring
mate.
it.
Punch her up!
My son is 11 and he needs to get to
Punch
school!
her up!
My son is 11, he needs to get to school and I need to get to work! So move out the way then! Move out of the way and let me get my son to school!
Hey, look, that's it! That's it! Push her! Go on! Push her! Get out the road, you silly!
Someone needs to move them out of the way! Move out of the way now!
So, have Insulate Britain's demonstrations actually made it harder for the government to focus public understanding on climate change? Joining me now is Tim Goff from Insulate Britain. Tim, thanks for coming in. I'm always impressed by the willingness of Insulate Britain to come in and face the music, as it were.
No problem, Colin. Good to see you.
Do you feel you've got your way with what the government's announced today?
Well, we'd certainly like to claim a victory today, yes, because the government has taken advantage of our 10-day moratorium on blocking the roads and given us something very substantial, it seems, from what you've said. We haven't looked in detail at the documents yet. That's something we're asking our experts to look at now. But I think it proves that civil disobedience does work.
Well, we'll come on to that. We'll come on to that in a second. You're declaring rather pompously, if you don't mind me saying, declaring a moratorium.
we did.
Declaring a moratorium.
Yeah.
Is it likely, do you think? I mean, OK, you're saying your experts are having a look at it, but this would be an elegant moment, wouldn't it, to say, actually, we put pressure on the government. We've got what we wanted. We've got a lot of what we wanted. Now let's just withdraw from the battlefield and stop annoying people.
Agreed, Colin. That's kind of what we're saying now. We do reserve the right to look at the documents, which we will do over the next few days. We're going to have a press conference on Friday once we've taken a close look at them, to which you are warmly invited. I don't know whether you'll be able to make that Friday morning.
Friday half-term with the kids. That's my excuse. Okay. I'll be sticking to that one. Look, I mean, there is a view, it happens to be my view, but I suspect it's widely shared, possibly by the majority of people in this country, which is that middle-of-the-road people on climate change, not climate sceptics, look at what Insulate Britain have done over the last 3 months. And actually, that's a period in which we ought to be looking at some of the agenda that forms the COP26 agenda. And instead, you've antagonised people to such an extent that their natural sympathy towards that cause has been deflected.
Well, we're less interested in a way in the public's views and more interested in what the politicians do.
Well, so politicians listen to the public.
Yeah, but they also listen to concrete actions that we're taking. We think our civil disobedience has actually worked in this case.
Well, blocking ambulances?
Yeah, well, not blocking ambulances because we always let red light ambulances through.
Well, we saw the footage. I mean, Tim, we saw the footage.
Yeah,
that
was someone with we saw some footage of someone trying to get to school. Now, we're willing to block them. But we don't block ambulances.
Just to help you on this, because I mean, it's interesting. So you don't. If an ambulance got blocked, then that was a mistake. You don't set out to block ambulances. Okay,
that's correct.
What about on the same day, a woman who was tailing an ambulance because her 81-year-old mum was being taken to hospital in a very grievous condition, and you stopped her? She was hysterical on the roadside.
We saw that.
For her, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's a price she's just got to pay.
It is tough. It is tough. Agreed. But we're asking for some tough concrete actions from the government. We're asking for, dealing with fuel poverty in this country, which is 8 to 10,000, maybe 40,000 people dying a year from that. That's 100 people a day in the winter. Colin?
You'd be in a better position, wouldn't you, though, Tim? You'd be in a better position, surely, if the people, and I resubmit to you, it's impressive the way you've come and sat down there, not just you, but some of your colleagues as well. And one of them, Cameron Ford, I think it was, 3 or 4 weeks ago, sat where you are now, and we talked about this. And I think it was literally, if not the next day, then a couple of days later, it was all over the Daily Mail that Mr. Ford, who'd been lecturing us from this bully pulpit about climate change, had recently completed a 2,000-mile tour around Europe in an old battered diesel van. The year before that, he'd done a 10,000-mile trip around North America. Total talking the talk and not walking the walk. I mean, it's bad enough you've got no democratic legitimacy, but to be hypocrites as well, that really annoyed people.
Yeah, I mean, there is a charge of hypocriticality, yeah, for sure. But we've got to see here that this is not a question of what individuals do, Colin. I mean, this is the whole lie about climate change, that somehow what us individuals do is going to make some difference. That is not the case. We have to have the politicians taking the concrete action. That is why we are so frustrated.
They are,
well, we hope they are.
They are.
That's why we're declaring victory.
Well,
but they weren't before.
But I put it to you that whatever's in this what did you say, 1,700-page document?
I think it's something like that.
Whatever's in this document, we know the way Whitehall works. You know the way civil service works. Anything that is in the government's COP agenda today has been in the works for months. And whatever Insulate Britain have done over the last 3 months, it has not counted a jot towards so much as a comma about any perks for people, or any inducements, I should say, for people to get a mortgage deal and then improve the insulation on their property. That was in the government's plan months ago. And all Insulate Britain have done, they've not inserted that. You can claim victory, but it's not your victory. That was civil servants who've done that. That was this government who's done that. All you guys have done in the build-up to COP26 is divert people or deflect people who are naturally sympathetic towards the cause of environmentalism, and it's made them scratch their heads and think, crikey, what a bunch of wallies.
Yeah, well, we didn't ask them to do that action that you just described. What we asked for was something a little bit more concrete, Colin. We said we wanted them to invest very substantial amounts of money, the government to invest, that is the taxpayer, to invest very substantial amounts of money in the housing of everybody within the next 9 years. That would create hundreds of thousands of levelling up jobs in this country, not gig jobs, proper jobs, skilled jobs. It's a massive project management thing that would involve significant investment in the future of this country, a return of £3 on every £1 we invest. And the measures that you've just mentioned, if that's all that the government has come up with, then we would say that's not quite enough. We think there's actually more in this 1,700 pages than you've just described. We certainly hope so.
Well, let me just give us an insight, if you can, Tim. Final thought. You've declared a moratorium. Your experts are going to have a look at this report. I mean, what is the democratic methodology and the mechanism that you will adjudge this? I mean, you're holding a sword of Damocles, not just over the government, but over everybody who travels by road around London. And you're saying we're going to have a look at this. Where's your constitution? Where's the transparency? How can I see how your experts, so-called, will get together and pore over this and arrive at a judgment? Because if you want to change people's minds in a democracy, you submit your views in a prospectus to an electorate. Everything you do just seems absolutely clouded and occluded, utterly untransparent. You've got all the rights that are afforded in a democracy to protest peacefully and not, as would happen in many countries, get your heads kicked in.
Yep.
And yet you're not prepared to submit yourselves to the scrutiny that any democratically accountable institution would do.
Well, there will be some scrutiny on Friday when we come out with our analysis of the documents. As I say, you're very welcome to come along, Colin. I think the important issue here is, yes, we have an absolutely extraordinary democracy in this country. I absolutely agree with you on that point. One of the aspects of our democracy which is kind of pretty unique, is our common law policies, which means that you can cause a disruption to prevent a greater disruption. What we fear is the greater disruption that's coming down the line. We are terrified of it. All the people blocking the roads are terrified of it. That's why they sit in front of those cars.
Well, you know, and we note that, don't we? We note they believe in it sufficiently to put themselves in danger. That's taken. Tim Goff, I really appreciate you coming in again and answering some of those questions. Thanks.
My pleasure, Colin. Thank you.
How is it that the Conservatives still hold a 5-point lead over Labour in the polls? We're halfway through this Parliament. The Tories have been in government for over a decade. You'd expect an opposition to be making hay.